Well, let's talk a little bit about more positive things, kind of. Different kind of thing. Actually touching on a little bit of what we talked about a little bit earlier on. We're going to talk a little bit about virtual reality, and specifically VR headsets, which I guess you need to see virtual reality, to be fair. So I don't know if any of you guys have actually used VR headsets. I have, back both again when I was a little younger and they first started sort of coming out. There was, I used to live in Boston then, and there was this company in Cambridge, it's a city nearby, and right across the river. And there was a company there that actually had, it was like an arcade of VR games. Basically, so you went in and I actually did like a skiing simulator. So I had this like huge thing on my head. And it was actually not bad. Like the graphics were pretty good, but yeah, basically, and you got to move around and basically ski down a hill. And there was like a whole thing of other things that you could experience there. And then that was pretty much like and then the store went away. And then that's pretty much the last that I heard or saw about like VR until recently, right? Like in the past, maybe 3 to 5 years? Yeah. I feel like they've just come back with a passion, right? And now there's video games, right? So you don't even, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to go down to this store that's here and I'm going to put a VR headset on. But like now you can buy them and you can experience this in the comfort of your own home as much as you want. You can even, I think there's actually things that you can put your smartphone through and kind of create like your own DIY VR headset.
Google has done this, right? Google has done this. And of course, when Facebook bought out Oculus and has now been trying to push that both in an educational sense, but also to the everyday user, was it HTC as well with I think it's called the Hive, right? I've not actually used it. I've seen a few people use it, but.
Yeah, there's like so many things out there, right? And so this brings up a good point of we don't know what this really does to our brains, right? Because it's not even like, oh, I'm going to go watch a 3D movie where I put those little glasses on and Jaws comes out at me, right? This is you're telling your eyes one thing and your body is experiencing something different. And depending on where you put that VR headset on, right? Like sometimes you can be in an environment that moves with that, with what you're seeing, right? So like, let's say if you're in a chair, or like you've got the external stimuli to match what's happening in this VR world, right? But for the most part, you're kind of probably just standing still, and maybe you can see your hands moving, but nothing else is really happening, right? Like you're not going to feel necessarily what you see, right? So there's some scientists at Leeds University that did a little test on children just to see, hey, what happens when you put these VR headsets on, individuals that haven't really truly had their whole body set already, like
they're not fully developed yet. They're still developing,
right? And what they found is kind of interesting, right? So, like I know that even for me, when I watch a 3D film with those little glasses, I get kind of dizzy. I can't stare at it for too long without kind of feeling nauseous. They're really cool and I like watching them, but it's like, okay, I can't take it too much, right? With VR, I've actually, not been, I didn't have one of those on my head long enough to really truly experience any effects because I'm scared of what I'll experience. But so they've put these kids for about 20 minutes in these VR headsets and they wanted to see what happened. And they saw that the kids started experiencing balance problems and vision problems, right? And that was just from 20 minutes.
Oh yeah.
Just 20 minutes. But the kids were, it's like age 8 to 12. So again, they're not, they're not 2 or 3 year olds, where, they already have balance problems.
They're already little small drunk people.
They're a little bit older children. But basically their stereo acuity, which is their ability to detect differences in distances was kind of disrupted. Like they couldn't really tell because what you're seeing with your eyes is sort of a 3D environment, but they're being shown on a 2D screen. Right? So your eyes, when you're looking at, I'm looking at this microphone, I can see it in 3D space because it is in 3D space, right? So as I move around it, my eyes get used to seeing things in 3D space. You're putting this on a 2D screen and tricking my mind into actually thinking that it's 3D, while super cool, it can really fuck with how your eyes perceive 3D space, right? And then, of course, you know, in terms of balance, like, we've got sensors inside of our ears that help us balance, you know, and a lot of people who have balance problems, it's usually, you know, sometimes they take a look at, like, what's happening, like, if you have an ear infection or something's going on with your ear, they'll take a look at that first just to be, like, ruling that out, that your balance isn't affected. So, right, now you have VR headsets. Your sound is only coming, again, whilst it's meant to mimic 3D, like, oh, there's a car behind you.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if you don't have necessarily good headphones that can sort of do that surround sound, and either way, like, you can't truly be behind you unless you sort of have headphones that go, like, all the way around you, right? Like, to mimic the sound. So there's a lot of, like, cues that kids can't, especially as they're growing up, right, and developing, that can really mess with their system. So, and then, of course, the balance issue. And this was only after, you know, the kids were having issues just being immersed just for a short period of time. So the question is here, you know, how do VR headsets affect everybody, right? Because if they're doing this for kids, you know, for a short period of time, okay, adults, maybe, like, we're better at X, Y, and Z. But if we start to spend a lot of time in VR headsets, we're fucked.
Right.
It's basically what can
happen? Yeah, it's like if you're in it for only 20 minutes and you're already seeing a sort of impairment, almost as if, like, let's say, for example, you drank alcohol, right? Give kids a little bit too much cough syrup, a little bit of that syrup. And
is this real life?
Yeah, you start getting some really fun viral videos on YouTube. But seriously though, that is very interesting to think that it can mess with you that much. And of course, kids too, because as these VR headsets become more readily available, these headsets are things that kids will want, and they are things that kids will want to jump on and will want to play for hours on end, right? It's already hard to keep kids away from their Nintendo Wii or DS or their PlayStation or Xbox, you know, and they're trying to spend hours upon hours on those games. So what if now they're in headsets doing the same thing? And I'm seeing all the time at grocery stores, for instance, when people will just put in or put on a video on their phone or a game and hand it to their kid, and the kid's like 3 years old.
Oh my God. That's
so they're already on the mobile phone in the grocery store playing Angry Birds or Candy Crush or whatever crap you put on your phones nowadays. But now to think of that with VR too, like, oh, Timmy, well, I'm busy right now. So here, go put on a VR headset and don't bash into any walls. Watch out for the dog or cat. I mean, that's really what we're saying. And an Epic Story actually mentions a good point here of the fact of that motion sickness, that they themselves are also experiencing that kind of motion sickness or disability when it comes to movement. And at the same time, you know, will graphics improve enough where we're seeing like an Erica type game in a headset? And how much would that really screw with us or even our understanding of what reality is? Because that even gets into that point too, of if these things do catch on and don't go the way of the Betamax or anything like that. Thank you for bringing that up, by the way, throwing out those classics. But, you know, if these do really pick up, what will be the impact if we get stuff like Erica or Beyond Two Souls Part 2 and we start getting lost? Because people are already getting lost in games. When there's tons of people who played hours and hours and hours in games like EverQuest back in the late 90s and early 2000s and died from playing so much because they were so immersed in the world. Hell, even for movies. I mean, people who watched Avatar.
Yeah.
There were several people who committed suicide after watching Avatar because it felt so real. They wanted it to be so real, but they knew it wasn't, and they couldn't live in this world knowing that fact. So what kind of emotional and mental triggers will things like VR, as you know, graphics improve and so forth, how will it impact those? What will set off our brains in a new way? It's scary to think about that. So, I mean, not even just now we're getting even deeper. We're not even just talking about like
the technology
awareness, but also just our reality overall.
Yeah, and the technology, you know, VR headsets are one thing, and Dynamite actually brings up a good point. You know, a holodeck, at least with a holodeck, you, at least from a you know, body awareness, spatial awareness point, is a little bit better than just a VR headset with headphones on, right? Because then you and your body are experiencing the same environment, right? Because the noises, the sounds, you know, and the visuals are kind of coming at you the way that they would normally in 3D life, right?
Yeah.
In IRL, if you will. But as Evan, as you mentioned, you know, okay, so now if it's super real, then what, right? Then you've got, there's a movie actually that came out with Bruce Willis, and the name I forget, but basically people have these kind of clones that go out into the world and they do their own thing, right? Like, I feel like, you know, we get to the point where VR becomes our world. Like, if you are on a holodeck or you are just using your headsets, that's crazy, because you can literally be lost in a way in your own, like, in your own world. It's a real world, quote unquote.
A real world. I'm a real world.
We're not talking about, you know, like maybe more like mental health issues or something like that, right? Where, you know, with schizophrenia, you hear auditory things that aren't experienced by any other person. You are experiencing something that is quote unquote real with a holodeck or a VR headset, you know, that kind of thing. But at the same time, it's not real, right? And then you know, the game developers or film developers or porn developers, you know, like, they can create these worlds for you. You'll start to have certain expectations that will not necessarily be able to be translatable into the actual real world. And you are, you can get lost in that, right? Like, why do I want to go to work when I can just be surrounded by kittens all day long?
That's true. You too can live inside the 3D world of a cat video.
Cats who don't want food. Cats that love me and don't scratch me. I mean, yeah, I would pay money for that, you know.
To each their own.
And now we're, you know, and you know, the point of this article too, it's also like kids, right? Like, we're teaching our children that, yeah, when you're bored, just pick up your smartphone and just play something or watch something, right? You don't actually have to interact with your parents who didn't want you in the first place. It's okay. You know, it's like, it's crazy because now, you know, we're teaching, I can't even imagine being that little, having had like the technology that exists for kids right now. Like, you're literally living in a digital world. Like, what's actually real for you is, you know, I don't know, Instagram likes or it's nuts.
Well, and actually Pixel Lily puts up a great point, is that it's the age of Tamagotchi, but in VR, right? I remember when the Tamagotchi first came out, all these kids wanted it, and it was like a digital Beanie Baby, right? Everyone wanted one of those too. And you'd feed it and take care of it during class, and then you'd sneak it away and pop back out and find out you killed your Tamagotchi because you forgot to feed it enough food or whatever. But yeah, it's getting to that point. And what is our reliancy on VR? What will be our reliancy on VR? I think, and don't get me wrong, because I really do think that VR has some great points to it as well. I mean, for instance, with the photo that you see here, they're incorporating the Oculus into schools. So for certain things where you just can't take a field trip to it, you can get kids to see it as best as possible and experience as close to as possible to what it would be like to be there. So, like, for instance, this could be great in history classes. It could be great in sociology classes or anything like that.
Even remote learning.
Like, remote learning, yeah.
You know, if a student can't be in class.
You know, and being immersed into that classroom might actually be interesting. Keep your interest. If you have an issue with, well, you know, I got Facebook over here in the corner and I got Twitch going on here and I'm watching Battle Right or something. And then over here, I've got, you know, the classwork I'm supposed to do. So, you know, there are benefits to it. I know, for instance, there's been a ton of articles within the past, I'd say 6 months that have been coming out where they've been pushing VR for those in hospitals, especially those for in the hospital for long-term care, because many of them either cannot leave their bed or they can't leave the hospital or they can't leave their room for whatever reason, whether it's due to the sickness they have and the concerns of it going viral, that sickness, or for instance, maybe they're too weak. Or they're attached to a bunch of machines right now to live, and they really can't leave their beds, so they're confined to there. But VR gives them a way to escape their hotel room and give them a little bit of their sanity back. Because I mean, I've stayed in a hospital overnight for long periods of time, whether for me personally or for someone else that I was there for. And it can drive you a little bit batty. You know, I mean, there aren't a ton of windows to look out of. And, you know, you feel very just locked in.
It's kind of like a prison, like a sick prison.
Right. And like everything is like super sterile and bright.
It smells weird.
It can really mess with your day and night cycle. It can really mess with your sense of reality. And so in a way, ironically enough, by bringing in virtual reality, it brings a little bit more of reality back to these individuals. So I find that incredibly fascinating. It's just, you know, I think the problem is that we need to really start regulating how these things are used. Because right now people go, well, this makes us money and we can sell it this way, so let's just put it out there, without really looking at consequences, without really looking at need and impact. You know, they're just trying to basically get on the top wave of something that's currently semi-trending and hope that enough people pick it up. And so, you know, even though it has benefits, it does have a lot of negatives too, depending on your age, depending on, again, the usage of it and the purpose. So it's hard to say, but I feel like if we keep pushing VR enough, we're going to start seeing the impacts within the next even 5 to 10 years, I feel like.
You know, and it's interesting. I feel like, you know, with tech, especially nowadays, things can go so... like, they can go both ways, right? Like, you can go really too far into one bad spectrum of it. Or if you take the time to, like, not be lazy about it and, you know, whether it's by regulating or looking at the technology that's available or that the technology that you want to influence to be built into the future, you know, shop with your wallet, as they say, or play with your wallet, as they say, you know, so it goes into the better side of the spectrum. But Black Mirror is a UK TV show, actually, that does a great job of actually looking at where we are now in the present, looking at kind of the technology and the things that are happening in our world, and then envisioning a future where maybe we take it a little too far. And there's actually an episode that they had voted... I don't know, a lot of people really liked the episode, and they're actually thinking about making that into a full-length film. Mm-hmm. But it is actually sort of about VR. Spoiler alert, not to give away too much, but it is about, you know, there's a twist in there that actually talks about how VR it can be positive. You know, sort of along the same lines of, you know, somebody maybe who is...
Wait, something positive in Black Mirror? Have you seen Black Mirror?
Oh, I have.
Shit's depressing, man.
I have watched the first 3 episodes, and the 3rd episode made me cry so much. I stopped watching the show. I was like, I can't. This is too real. This is too real, and I'm not even watching it in 3D. But man, that 3rd episode, if you watch it, just bring a hanky, bring a friend, get something with you, because that ruined. Anyways, but yeah, Black Mirror is an amazing show. I mean, it's not quite like The Twilight Zone, which is also a favorite of mine, but it really just mostly looks at, again, where we are now and like where we take technology and also, you know, mostly technology. I think that's their focus, but also just, you know, human nature, right? Like, where does human nature taken to its extremes go? But there is a great episode. Whose name I don't know right now, but it's very recent, and it does actually point out, you know, VR can be helpful, exactly like you mentioned, in those instances where maybe you're housebound, you're bedbound, you're sick, elderly, cannot really move, can't really experience the world as you want to. VR can afford that immersibility, but I do think we need to be careful with the technology. You know, like a holodeck, yes. VR headset, no.
Well, and this is the other thing too, is that as we kind of see VR stumble around to try to get its footing, there are plenty of other companies that are actually going, you know what, I think we can go further than VR, And they're looking at things like, okay, well, how can we launch things into a more interactive hologram? And Microsoft is one of the companies working on this concept where called HoloLens, actually. So talking about holodecks, they're trying to create the HoloLens, and they're saying that this is going to be great for students even. And so for those in the medical field, for example, who might not be able to fully, let's say, pull a Leonardo da Vinci and start digging up bodies and cutting them open to see, okay, well, these are where the capillaries are. This is how the blood flows through the system.
That's what he did, really?
That's how, yeah. That's how he got so much detail in his drawings, was that he would actually dig up bodies and study them, which was even illegal back then. But, we look at his drawings now and go, okay, that was a little crazy, but that's awesome what he did, because no one else documented the human body like he did. So with this, though, what we're talking about here is getting students real, almost hands-on training and breaking up, the different parts of the body and being able to see it in front of them without it being an actual body, So it's like giving people access to things they normally would not have access to in order to educate them. And I think that's something that's going to be huge. And I would say would be way better than VR altogether. No need for a headset, no need for gloves or need for some sort of what do I want to say, like wand or whatever it may be, and really just be able to actually interact with the things in front of you to learn or see things from another perspective. So basically like an augmented reality in a way, as some people are saying in chat, like AR, augmented reality, but definitely not assault rifle. No, not that kind of AR. And you know what AR they meant, Mike. Good Lord.
Pixelily says that there's someone who's made a small robot that's for kids who are too sick to attend school. So the robot live streams everything from the classroom to the kid who's at home. That's cool.
That's very cool. And that's a great way of, again, using that technology in a smart way. How does it impact someone positively? And, Lily also mentions, too, for being someone who spends a lot of time stuck in my house due to disease, I would love more ways to interact with the outside before the cabin fever sets in. Which is absolutely right. There are tons of people that we take for granted, we don't really think about, who are impacted by disease or, even just issues with things like anxiety can keep you locked up in your house if you can't be surrounded by a ton of new people and all the new kind of cues and the stimuli that will fire off all the different neurons. There are many people that can't handle that. And so a lot of times they lock themselves in their home. It's hard to deal with. So, what are some ways that might be able to assist them in that and in maybe experiencing a little bit more what life is or could be with them immersed into it? And maybe over time that can help them conquer some of that anxiety and be able to actually step foot into the real world.
I was just going to say, yeah, because we also have to be careful to not have technology just be something that we depend on so much that we can't, sort of just be ourselves at the same time. Because
right.
that's the other problem, right? Is I'm a blind as a bat without my glasses, and I was talking to one of my eye doctors one time, and he said, well, I can give you glasses because every year my prescription went worse and worse and worse, and I was like, man, the fuck. I'm gonna have glasses that are like up to here when I'm older. And I was talking to my eye doctor, and he said, well, what I could do is actually give you a prescription that is lower, right? So it's not what your eyes need, but it's just a little bit below to actually make your eyes, to see if like they'll get not like get better by themselves, but it's like you make them work a little bit too so they don't get so lazy. And I was looking at him like, is that really how that works? Like, what? Like, sure, I'll try it. I don't know about that. And, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's the age. It's like this, I just got older and my eyes just stopped changing so much that actually kind of, slowed down my worsening eyes. But at the same time, now I'm like, well, was that true? Like, I mean, am I too dependent on my glasses? So it's like, it's very interesting because, when I look at tech specifically, we are so dependent on everything, right? Like, I can't travel anywhere without my GPS. I can still read a map pretty well, though. You give me a paper map, I love those things. I can chart myself a course, but that's because I learned how to do that before there was GPS, where I had to do it.
Yeah.
But nowadays, right, like I don't know, can people chart their own courses on paper maps? Who knows, right? Like you have to teach yourself that. And so there's also that fear too that I think some people have with technology where, man, like we're getting maybe too dependent on technology. At the same time, things in our world are just becoming like there's more of everything, right? There's more stimuli. Yep. There's more people. There's more things you have to do. There's more work. There's more obligation. There's just more than there ever was back in Da Vinci's time, right?
Yes, right.
And so our bodies and our minds especially, they need help, right? Like we
haven't evolved fast enough to keep up with the technology that we've been evolving.
Exactly, which is why, again, going back to my previous point of we still have to be careful with the technology. We can't get lazy on how we develop it because there's not only the possibility of getting too dependent on it, but also it changing us for the worse. Like with these kids, right? Like we're throwing off their balance and their vision. So now what? Do they have to just always have a VR headset to like function in the world? You know, like it's kind of crazy if you start to kind of think in that way as well.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Well, and Pixelily here says that VR for elderly has shown a very positive effect on their mental health, which makes their physical health also better. And that could be a good point too, right? The brain controls everything. It's pretty much the person in the control room at NASA going, okay, we're going to launch this and we're doing, you know. So they're getting, you know, the brain is getting all these signals and it's telling the body how to function, how to respond. And again, if we have one little hiccup, the brain then tells the body to overreact. And that's where we get things like anxiety, right? Where anxiety is a false signal that the brain is sending to the body going, go into fight or flight, run or punch someone, run or punch someone. And
I'd always just go with run.
Run is safer. It's safer that way because if you punch the wrong person, yeah. So, but yeah, I can see where, again, that can also help positively too. We also have Lunar has VR been tested on animals? That's actually a really good question. I like that question so much. I actually looked it up quickly here because, you know, Google. And there's actually...
You can't live without
the
Google search.
Alphabet Incorporated. So The Scientist, which is thescientist.com, has an article about virtual reality for freely moving animals. It says that experiments that place untethered fish, flies, and mice in simulated environments give clues about the animal's social behavior. So it looks like they are utilizing VR on animals. Some of it looks like it's more so for us per se to get a better sense of their behavior, how they move about a space. But it also looks like they're also putting VR onto animals who are tethered as well. There's some instances of, they're talking about mice here and a few other animals too that have been tested on. So it looks like there's nothing really substantial yet per se. I'm sure if you keep looking though, there will be something that arises eventually. I know typically they do try to test on animals before they throw something onto humans. That's usually, but that's not always all the time, especially if you market something as something that's supposed to be meant for entertainment rather than like health and wellness. As soon as you tag on health and wellness or pharmaceutical or anything like that, then that has a whole new set of regulations. But as soon as you start putting entertainment to it, they're like, oh, okay, so you light yourself on fire and that's entertaining. Well, okay, I guess we can let it slide on this one. Maybe not that extreme, but you get the point there. So this is a really fascinating article here too at thescientist.com. We also have Pixelly saying basic navigation should be in schools. Well,
oh yeah.
That's very true.
Also basic finance. I don't know why that's not taught.
That's another kicker there too. Lunar, seriously, people without their phones nowadays, they're like fish out of water. True. I mean, you've said it perfectly. There's not much else to add on to that except for, yes, true.
And when they have their phones, they're like blind bats. Because they just walk like this.
With their phone right in front of them, right. I can't tell you how many pedestrians, well, I mean, I'm a pedestrian too, but like how many people on the sidewalk I've almost smacked into because they're walking down the center and they're plugged into their phone. Now, I understand, right? You have business, you're checking your email or... And
we've all been guilty of it.
Right, exactly. I mean, that stuff happens. But as soon as you're just attached to it for 20 minutes while you're walking, and you could walk in front of a car, you could walk into a tree, into a person, and you're that connected... it gets a little extreme. And actually, I don't remember. In Pixel, actually, you might be familiar with this because I can't remember if it was Norway or Sweden or what other Scandinavia somewhere. But they made it actually illegal to cross the street while on your phone.
Ooh.
Yeah, so not only can you not drive while being on the phone, it's actually illegal to cross the street while on your phone because I've had so many issues with people on Snapchat or Instagram or what have you, and they're looking away on their phone and they just cross without paying attention to whether the light is green or red or the crosswalk area is clear of cars. They just don't see it. And it's not the fact that they're trying to be malicious or, a jerk or whatever else. It's just the fact that their attention is so absorbed into whatever's on that phone, it can easily give them tunnel vision and could get themselves killed.
It's fucked up.
So there's a lot of crazy out there. Pixel also says, in the long run, technology is a double-edged sword. You have to use it right. It's like with anything else, right? There's too much of a good thing. Your body can have too much potassium, and you have to go into the hospital for it. It's a true thing. You could have too much B12, even though it's getting harder to get B12, but that's a whole other conversation. B6, vitamin D, at least you get that from the sun. But it's harder to get those, but you can overdose on a good thing too. Dynamite says Animal Crossing is worth more than your life. Just to throw that out there. So if you haven't played Animal Crossing yet, do so.
Well, I don't know which country made that illegal, but Honolulu has done that. So at Honolulu crosswalks, you cannot be looking. So the city just approved a law making it illegal for pedestrians to cross the street or highway while viewing a mobile electronic device. You go, Hawaii. You rock.
Yeah, Honolulu.